Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on Path of Public Service, I'm proud to bring you the Diana Montford Show Triad Edition. Greetings and welcome, Diana.
Hi, how are you? And yes, tonight we have quite a special show. This is the Diana Montford Show. We discuss all things transgender on this show. And tonight we have not only the usual triad in alphabetical order, Cathryn Platine, a well-known transgender and feminist activist, and Joann Prinzivalli, an attorney and one of the first transgender women ever elected to public office in New York State. We also have, here's our extra special guest, Ms. Susan Davis, who is a Canadian transgender activist. She's going to tell us what is going on in Canada, how it affects us here in the U.S., and what is going on around the world. She's privy to all sorts of international information. And we are going to discuss the transgender scene, not only in the U.S., but of course in Canada and the rest of the world. And as soon as Kathy's having a little trouble with the Zoom, I believe, but she will join us momentarily. So, Joann, how's everything?
Oh, everything is fine on this end, except I'm not well. Other than that, yeah, it's.
I thought I rebooted, but it looks like it didn't do. Don't we reboot?
No, we're on.
We're waiting until January 20th to see what's going to happen in the United States, but it seems like a circus is erupting in the incoming administration. I don't know how effective they're going to be in doing the plans that they have, but you got to strap in and get ready to either flee or fight or whatever.
Well, as we're going to discuss on this show later, there's nowhere to flee to. The entire world is becoming very fascistic and anti-trans. So frankly, there is nowhere to run to.
Well, there are places that are less bad than others. New York so far is still pretty good and may continue to be that way. I'm banking on it still continuing to be that way.
Yes, but Canada is out. They're going right wing.
Oh, is that the case?
Susan earlier today.
I think we're going to hear about that then.
Yes. So we are, and I was thinking very seriously of going to my ancestral home in Spain, but that is going right wing. So scratch Spain off the list.
Italy's done the same thing for me.
Yeah. So this is a problem. We have a little problem here, folks. But being the resilient, and we are truly resilient, the resilient community that we've always been since the dawn of time, I think we'll be fine. We've always existed. We always will. That is something the right-wingers don't realize, that we are very, very, very strong. And that is what we've always been. We have always been very strong and very determined. And this too shall pass. This is a backlash. A few years ago, everything was very trans positive. Now it's very trans negative. But cheer up, folks. The pendulum always swings back. So, we'll be fine. We always have been and we always will be. And when I was growing up in Greenwich Village in the late 1960s, there were a gazillion trans people in the village. It was illegal. It was all sorts of things, yet the community flourished. So there is nothing to worry about. As Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. What do you think, Joann?
Yeah, well, right now they finally disconnected. Cathryn's thing is just disconnected, so it's just you and me right now. So for now, why don't we talk a little bit in general about the upcoming legislative season?
All right. Well, what do you want to talk about? Tell me.
So far, the people who track these things have counted over 120 new pieces of anti-trans legislation around the United States to be introduced for the 2025 legislative session in the various states. Now, legislation is even being introduced in states that are not going to be passing any of this legislation. It's being introduced by Republicans anyway. But in the 22 or so red states where they've already started the genocide in terms of enacting laws that criminalize us and make us unable to receive health care and other things, they're just going to get worse. The thing is, those states, they have free reign because the federal courts are now allowing these anti-trans things to stand, where previously there had been some resistance in the federal courts. The impression is that the case from Tennessee that was argued in the Supreme Court earlier may end up being a bad decision for us, and that will tie the hands of the good federal judges as these things continue to get enacted.
Well, now let me ask you this: will that have results throughout the nation? Will they somehow make it illegal to be transgender in California, New York, Illinois? The states where, and Illinois has traditionally been very gay positive, as you know. It was the only state where homosexuality was not illegal for a long, long time until Texas versus Lawrence or Lawrence versus Texas. So will these laws infect blue states?
The impression that I am getting as of now, based on slightly on the interview that the incoming administration gave when they were given Times Person of the Year award, is that we're not a priority for the Republicans nationally, even though they're making this big stink about bathrooms in Congress. But we're not a priority nationally. They're going to do a few, high-level things like barring us from the military again, as they did in the first Trump administration. But they're probably not going to enact a national restrictive laws that would criminalize us and deny us any kind of health care. Now, they may make it so that the federal government won't pick anything up, but the states, the good states, will pick it up anyway. So you think in terms of Medicaid and Medicare. Well, if Medicare doesn't, but there will be ways that people in these good states will have their supplemental insurance pick up this stuff, even if the federal government isn't paying any portion of it. Again, they're going to leave it to the states. The thing I do fear that they might do is the equivalent of a Fugitive Slave Act, where if a trans individual from one state goes to another state to get treatment, and they go back to their original state, they're going to be looking for hospitals in the good state to provide information on it so that they can be prosecuted in their home state. Right now, Texas, for instance, is already trying to prosecute in related, not trans issues, but in connection with abortion pills. They want to prosecute a New York doctor for prescribing a woman in Texas from New York prescribing abortion pills. And Ken Paxton is trying to make it so that New York will give this doctor up. And that's not going to happen. New York already has a shield law in effect now. If the Supreme Court says that New York shield law has to bow to Texas, that's a problem. That would be like having a Fugitive Slave Act thing.
Now, excuse me, why would Texas have priority over New York? I mean, that's one state against another. And what if the federal government said that and New York resolutely said, no, we're not doing that? We don't care what the law is. We're not doing it.
Texas's point of view in this abortion pill case is that the doctor in New York, even though the doctor in New York had no connection with the state of Texas, by prescribing to a Texas resident an abortion pill violated Texas law remotely, and therefore should be subjected to prosecution in Texas. And of course, New York has a shield law, and in New York, prescribing abortion pills is perfectly legal. So the doctor broke no law in New York. It's similar. If there was a situation where I prepared a deed, being a lawyer, I prepare a deed for a property in California. I'm not admitted to practice in California. I prepare a deed for someone in California. California might have an issue with my practicing law, even though I've never been in California. I never would be in California, but they might make a complaint to New York to try to have me disciplined in New York for practicing law in California, even though I never had any physical contact there. So there are ways that these things can happen, but I just hope that they don't. And I think we're
well, all right. Now let me ask you this: if a resident of a
they're
hello,
back. Yeah, they're back. We can start talking about everything
all
else.
right. Well, hi, Kathy and Susan. How are you?
We're doing fine.
We're very good tonight, and now our network seems to be holding up. So knock on wood and cross your fingers.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Susan, why
guys.
don't you tell us something about yourself?
So hi, I'm Susan Davis. I've been living in Canada for the last in April it'll be 25 years.
Were you born in the U.S.?
I was born in Milwaukee, and my wife and I moved up there in up to Canada. Actually, no, this year it was 20 years. So we've been living in Canada for 20 years now. We live in Toronto, which is
Excuse me. Is there a reason that you moved to Canada?
well, we joke that we were refugees from the Bush administration, but the real truth is that I had a job opportunity that was compelling. Toronto is a great. There's a lot going on in Toronto, lots of opportunity, and it's become extremely expensive to live recently. But other than that, it's a fantastic place.
Let me ask you this. Now, earlier today, we discussed this, and you said that Canada was turning right wing. And so people who live in the U.S. who are planning to refugee to Canada, trans people, should probably not bother because Canada will not
You're
welcome
breaking up.
trans folk. Can you hear me?
I think they froze.
Oh, okay. Well, now, Joann, you were saying if look, if a resident of a red state comes to New York, physically comes here, gets abortion pills or hormone pills or whatever, and then goes back to their red state, since the person was physically in New York and was prescribed these things here, can the red state in any way, shape, or form prosecute or try to prosecute a doctor here?
They might, well, not the doctor in that case, since everything happened in New York, but they would want New York to disgorge information as to the fact that the person obtained an abortion pill in New York, and were to use that, even if they used it in Texas or he used it in New York, they would want to prosecute them anyway because they would claim an interest in the quote unborn child, close quote.
All right, now let me ask you this. If New York said, no, we don't care what the law is, we're not giving you the doctor, forget it. That won't be happening. And just, they don't care. Let's say they just do not give a damn what the Supreme Court says, what anyone says. They won't give up the doctor. What happens then?
Well, at that point, you have a conflict between the states, and that goes to federal court, where the Supreme Court, because it's a conflict between the states, the Supreme Court has what's called original jurisdiction, and the Supreme Court would be able to try the case ab initio as a conflict between the states of New York and the state of Texas, and that would be binding on the states, unless we had a secession of some kind, in which case there would be other consequences. So if New York
What other consequences?
well, if New York secedes, the federal government could send federal troops in to occupy New York and try to keep New York in the Union. And I don't think New York is in a position to provide strong military resistance to the United States military. Even if the New York National Guard might not manage to resist, the full weight of the U.S. military.
Could the UN step in and do something?
Oh, that would be really interesting. To have the UN act. The UN is pretty much owned by the United States and the Russians and the Chinese, and a couple of other original member countries that have veto power over anything that gets done in the Security Council. And so no, there's going to be the United States would veto anything against the United States, and that's the UN is not in no position to do anything about the United States if the United
What
States.
if the doctor who had been accused went into hiding, and we just said, "Well, we're sorry, we can't find her. We don't know where she is," even if we did? Then they couldn't do anything, could they?
I think we have Susan here. Susan, you're back.
Yeah.
Exclamation mark.
Sorry, just a second. Amanda, please be quiet. We're on live now. So we're back on my laptop. Sorry, we're trying to figure out a network problem here. Anyway, hello.
I'm glad you're back.
Hi. You were saying that Canada is going, well, frankly, fascist. So,
okay,
what's going to happen there?
For some background, there are 3 national parties in Canada, plus one more party that exists only in the province of Quebec. The parties are the New Democrats, who are progressive, the Liberals, who are similar to the right wing of the Democratic Party here, and basically have never met a corporate donor they didn't like, and the Conservatives, who used to be very mild conservatives, and now they've become very, very Trumpy conservatives. And the Liberals have been in power since 2015, and they've done things like work on climate change and a number of other things like that. The NDP and the Liberals combined to try to get them a national drug plan through that's recently just started. But the Liberals have been really unpopular lately. Some of it has been stirred up right-wing anger over pandemic issues. Others are just that have more to do with the fundamentals of the current Liberal Party and people being generally disappointed in them. And unfortunately, that means that's placed the Conservatives to be the most likely party to win the next upcoming election. And the polls are currently suggesting that they might win a majority. And just the other day, the NDP, which had been propping up the Liberals, said that they were going to turn around and vote for no confidence in the Trudeau government, which basically guarantees an early election in January or February, and the Conservatives are heavily favored to win, which means bad things on a federal level in Canada. And there are also some problems going on in the provinces as well. There was a very negative policy from the right-wing government in New Brunswick that was recently voted out, targeting trans kids in school. And most recently, there have been some extremely virulently anti-trans bills pushed through in the province of Alberta, which is under an extremely far right provincial government after a number of years of the NDP being in power. Then in Canada, we have something called the notwithstanding clause that allows provinces to override constitutional guarantees of civil rights if the province says that, notwithstanding any provisions in the Constitution, we're going to do this for the next 5 years or however long it is. And the Conservatives in Alberta have said that they're going to use the notwithstanding clause to target trans people. And now we're staring down the barrel of a like-minded federal government. Many of the other provinces, things stand better for trans people, but we're all worried, very worried about how the upcoming election's going to go. And
it sounds as though it's almost worse there than it is here.
Well, given some of the things that have been happening in states like Texas and Florida, I wouldn't go that far, because things are extremely bad down here. And for example, we have healthcare in Canada, actual public single payer public healthcare that includes things like transition care. That is absolutely a pipe dream down here. And there's a general political tradition of tolerance in Canada that has tended to be a moderating influence on the worst excesses of the right. And in recent years, out in the prairies in Alberta and Saskatchewan, the more American-style populist far-right and evangelical social conservative type conservatism has been on the rise out there, including some stirred-up anger, populist anger happening in those couple of provinces. Some of that ties back to things that Alberta is essentially the Texas of Canada. They have an economy that includes a lot of oil and gas extraction. The Alberta tar sands are a very big production center for some very dirty oil, and a lot of the jobs out there depend on the tar sands, and that has put Alberta at odds with the rest of Canada, and they've glommed on to a number of other issues in opposition to where the rest of Canada has been, partly as a result of that. For example, during the pandemic, there was a big protest convoy that blockaded the federal capital, and that also tried to shut down one of the border crossings from Alberta into to Montana. There's been some there's been some litigation that's fallen out, including some criminal charges that were laid against some of the organizers, and that's all shaken out in the last few years. So there are some very bad things happening in Alberta right now. There were some bad things happening in New Brunswick, but then the Conservatives got turfed out at the provincial level there. And then there are other provinces like British Columbia and Quebec and Ontario that have a bit more hope than some of the worst places like Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, when I was
Are you worried about yourself and your life, and are you worried for yourself?
So I have a longer term perspective. I first came into the trans community, or I first got into contact with the rest of the trans community back in 1989, in the immediate fallout from the Reagan administration. When the whole community was driven underground. early TERFs like Janice Raymond had persuaded the Reagan administration to marginalize trans people. There wasn't any political consciousness, and people back then there was a large culture of security that kept anyone from really feeling that they could speak out. And when I look at where the world was then versus where we are now, even with some of the worst impulses for in both the U.S. and Canada and over across the Atlantic in the UK, even with some of those coming true, we're still ahead of where we were back in the 80s and 90s. And it's frustrating that we have to fight a rearguard action after some decades of positive change and finally emerging as and taking our place in the rest of society. But we've fought this fight before and come out with positive consequences. And if we stand together and look out for one another, we can do that again.
Now, every generation apparently seems to have to fight for women's rights, for LGBTQ rights.
Indeed.
The fight renews every single generation. This is ridiculous.
Thomas Jefferson's famous quote is that the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed with the blood of patriots. Now, that gets into some rather bloodthirsty imagery, but the idea that a new breath of freedom needs to emerge with each generation is it's not a new idea. And I do see a whole lot of passion from younger generations, and where our trans kids and our younger trans adults who've just emerged from being trans kids, or who've emerged from their eggs breaking, so to speak, that really gives me a lot of hope. I believe in us, even if I don't believe in decision makers and other cis people out there who have either abandoned or turned against us in the past.
Well, cis people often feel that they own the world and that we are, at best, barely tolerated, unwanted guests. And they don't seem to realize that the world belongs to all of us, but that's the way it is. Do you think that, all right, now, some people here, some trans folk, were planning to go to Canada if it became really bad here. Obviously, that's no longer an option. Is there anywhere on Earth that you know of where, excuse me, where trans folk can go?
So Canada has become difficult, not just because there's the prospect of a right-wing government, but because from the Liberals end, there have been recent announcements about sharply restricting the number of immigrants that Canada will take. And it's always been the case for at least the last couple of decades that getting through the Canadian immigration system is a process that takes a long time. So it's already too late to try to begin a new application for residence in Canada and be able to move in late January. But there are some sanctuary states in the U.S. that can be as much of a sanctuary as the better provinces in Canada can be. If you're looking to come to Canada, come because you're really interested in Canada and you love Canada more than looking at it as a refuge. If I had to find a refuge, I would probably go to Iceland, which has it's a small country, but for example, Reykjavik Pride is the biggest annual celebration in the country. There's a very active trans community out there. The right wing gets into government a lot, but their right wing is about business types, corrupt business types wanting to raid the public treasury, and not about people wanting to use bullying a marginalized group as a way to grab the levers of power. So
would you consider, if things got really bad in Canada, would you consider coming back to the U.S. to live?
I don't foresee the U.S. being a better option than Canada at any point. I also have we also have a blue water cruising yacht, and honestly, if things got bad, my escape strategy would be to go off cruising, and that's we can work tech jobs from over satellite internet, and actually get from country to country as the political climate and climate change favorably or unfavorably. But yes, a lot of the places like Canada and a lot of the European Union states that have been holding themselves up as refuges as in recent years and in the last couple of decades, there's been a groundswell of negative conservative populism there. Now, how much of that is in reaction to fallout, lingering fallout from the pandemic, or anxieties from a sort of last gasp from older conservatives looking at a world evolving in front of them? To what degree that will last, or whether that's a pendulum that will swing back, is a very interesting question that we'll have to manage very carefully going forward.
I think I would like to circle back on to the for our viewers and listeners, to the issue of possibly seeking asylum in Canada. I know that all one has to do is present oneself at the border, fill in a form, and they'll let you in. The thing is that at this, I would figure I would only be interested in temporary asylum anyway. I don't have a passport. I have the real ID type of driver's license, so I can drive to Canada.
You need a passport, no, you can.
I know what I know what I can do is that if I get there, once I get there and I find a permanent place, like let's say somewhere in Scandinavia or in the Netherlands, Canada would be able to issue what's called a refugee travel document that works like a passport to get one from Canada to the ultimate destination, and that would be how to get. I mean, Canada wouldn't be the ultimate destination; it would be the temporary stayover.
The thing that you're missing that is fatal to the strategy that you're describing is that Canada and the U.S. have what's called a safe third country agreement. Canada won't take refugees arriving by land from the United States.
No, the United States but Canada is the first safe country to get to from the United States.
Canada deems the United States to be a safe country, and changing that designation has profound consequences on U.S.-Canadian relations, and Canadian governments are generally deterred from doing that. It may be in fact be the case that trans people are marginalized, and if there were a progressive government in power in Canada, we might be able to see LGBTQ folks, if things go very badly here, getting some consideration there. But that's not the direction that the Canadian federal government, who are the ones being the decision makers, would be going. Now, Canada does have a long tradition of welcoming refugees, and the Immigration and Refugee Board and their processes. There's certainly there's a reason why Canada is seen as a very welcoming place for refugees. And for example, with the recently ended Syrian civil war, we've taken in a lot of Syrian refugees in recent years. There's a very strong Ukrainian community in Toronto, in the neighborhood where we used to live, and a lot of Ukrainians have come to Canada. But yeah, there's unfortunately, and even worse, is it's like the situation in the UK, where not just the Conservatives, but then the sort of centrist, center to center and 1 inch to the left party are both acting in restrictive ways. The Liberals themselves have been talking about clamping things down and reducing the numbers of people that Canada is generally going to take, and that's a dynamic that's gonna play out for at least the next couple of years.
With the fact that Joann is a well-known trans activist, as is Kathy, as am I, would that cut us any slack if we escaped to Canada?
You'd still certainly be welcomed warmly by Canadian trans people. I don't know that would have that would have an impact on.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, because we would be the first targets because we are public persons, would that in some way? All right, here's a short, quick anecdote. My grandfather was a famous liberal politician in Spain. The Spanish Civil War happened.
Yep.
He, my mother, and grandmother had to escape, and they went all over South America, and then they came here.
Yep.
Roosevelt granted, this was like in the late 30s, 1938. Roosevelt granted them political asylum on the basis that my grandfather was too famous to, in other words, he was a natural target.
Yep.
And they needed asylum. That's what I'm saying. Would the three of us who do the triad, because we are well known for doing the triad, that have a better chance of political asylum than, say, a hairdresser or something? Hello?
Oh, I think we lost Susan. She's frozen. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, so scratch Canada. Canada's out of the question.
Not.
Oh, wait, Susan's back.
So did you hear what I said?
Oh, Cathryn, can you? Oh, we lost their picture, but they're still here.
Well, I don't know what to say. We seem to be having extreme technical difficulties, and bear with us, folks. What can I say?
Sorry
so,
about
Joann, given the fact that we are well-known trans activists, would that help or hinder us? It would hinder us here.
Well,
but would it help us?
Right now, we've got we have a new bill, for instance, introduced in the U.S. Senate called the Defining Male and Female Act of 2024, introduced by Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall, that would erase transgender people from under the law. That we are not exceptions to the binary nature of sex, and in no case is an individual sex determined by self-identification or stipulation, but that it's based on the sex assigned at birth. Now the thing is that I will argue against that if it was ever passed, because Senator Marshall doesn't understand genetics, does not understand biology, and wants to oversimplify it to a level that that one would say is not even Mendelian. Oh, I think they're back. They may be coming back. Cathryn and Susan, are you there?
We are. I can't get Kathy on camera because I'm sitting exactly in the one spot in the room that has decent Wi-Fi signal, and if I try to
Right.
turn the laptop
We are almost out of time anyway. So, Susan, is there a place you can think of for all trans people from any walk of life to escape to if we must?
Um, there are look around for a number of different countries. I mean, Iceland's only one exception, and it's too small to fit the whole community in because the whole country is only 350,000 people. But there are still some bright spots out there. Some of the European countries, even with the threat of right-wing governments coming. But really, what we need to do is we need to stand and fight and resist and take back where we are now, and not let them have the U.S. and Canada.
Which is the
You
point
mean,
I
in
was
effect,
going to make.
resist via the law, not resist physically with
Yes.
violence, but resist
Yes.
legislatively.
Yeah, when I say fight, I mean fight in court, fight by going and lobbying, fight by organizing, fight in the political sphere, fight in stand up and be counted in society, and look after each other and make sure that that people are okay in the face of regressive laws in various places. If you have friends,
What if they negate our voices and refuse to allow us to fight legislatively? What if they say, you people don't count, you are sick, crazy perverts, and we do not care what you think, want, say, or do? What do we do then?
So it depends on who you mean by they. The Trumpers won by half an inch in the most recent election, and won by half an inch in 2016, and lost by half an inch in 2020. There's still a good swath of folks who will stand with us, and also obviously a lot of folks who will abandon us for a few bucks. But what the bad scenario you were describing was where we started at the beginning of my career as an activist, and it's again, it bothers the hell out of me that we're having to do this again, but we've fought this fight before, and the ground is laid a little bit more easily to bring things back once we start being the flavor of the day. We were a convenient target because we're small and
Weird.
small and easy to bully. And when bullying us doesn't turn the economy around, the working class and other folks who lined up behind the Trumpers for economic reasons are not going to be impressed by hey, look, at least we kept that one trans girl in your state from playing badminton. That's not going to wash.
The fact of the matter is, we're more in danger of being a backlash from the left than we are from the right at this point, because as soon as Trump does his tariff thing, and the prices of everything goes through the roof, and people realize how badly they've been screwed, then trans people are going to be the last thing they're worried about. Yeah, it's going to be impossible to blame us for it.
When we're not, a lot of the traction that the Trumpers got was because they did a smart thing and refocused on issues like inflation, and again, they've used it. There's a lot of impatience with the degree to which the right has tried to make, oh, look, a trans person, their entire personality recently, and there's a lot of impatience to that. So there are dark clouds immediately on the horizon, but once the squall blows through, the weather is likely to be not quite as stormy, even if it keeps raining.
I hope so. I hope you're right. And you seem to have a keen grasp of the political situation, so it's likely that you are right. But we have great problems ahead, and there's no way around that, is there?
And part of it is I'm a priestess of Cabela Magna Mater, and so I run on faith, and I have faith in us.
All right, quickly. We're almost out of time. Let me ask you this: if it's part of your religion because you worship a goddess, excuse me, to be a woman, to dress as a woman, to be socialized as a woman, can you use that as your religious freedom and be a woman?
The problem there is there was a 19th century Supreme Court decision called Reynolds versus the United States that held that while freedom of religion is broadly granted by the First Amendment, that there are that the state has a lot more latitude in restricting specific religious practices. So, and specifically, this was aimed at the Mormons and polygamy back then, and the Mormons weren't able to make, but that's the core of our religion wash, and the Supreme Court has been rigged over the last couple of years, and any sort of major shift away from Reynolds is really unlikely to be seen.
I'm gonna disagree with that, only because there's some there was some more recent things. There was a more recent case involving the use of peyote, where the Supreme Court followed Reynolds, but then the federal government decided that it was going to enact a law, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that was designed to make those cases irrelevant. And the weird thing is that Antonin Scalia wrote the majority opinion in that peyote case. And
in fact, we used that case in our own case against the town of Catskill and Greene County for our tax exemption. I lean pretty heavily on that.
Right, and so the thing is that the religious freedom argument can make sense. The thing is that the particular Supreme Court that we have right now they will make their decision and then justify it afterwards. And so really, I have zero confidence in the federal court system right now.
We have a Texas sharpshooter Supreme Court. They'll shoot bullets at the side of a barn and then draw bullseyes around them afterwards.
Yes, exactly.
Well, beautifully said, Hercules. How much time do we have?
About 8 minutes. I think we have about 8 minutes.
Okay.
We have around 8 minutes.
Any closing thoughts? Any, Susan, since you're a wonderful guest, any uplifting messages for the trans community?
Just what I've said before. We've been in pickles even worse than this before and gotten ourselves the hell out of them. And we've got a bigger and stronger crew of activists from these newer generations than from my generation or Kathy's. Really, we're the same generation, having come up in the 90s. We were tiny back then.
But mighty. We were very mighty.
Yeah. And there are a hell of a lot more, and not just trans, but non-binary folks as well. And there was a lot of infighting between trans people and actually both bi and trans people against certain parts of older, largely gay and lesbian, but some bi as well. Some other parts of the LGBT community, which is a lot more unified these days, and that's another front in that we're not going to have to refight.
Susan, how can people contact you if they would like to continue this discussion over the internet?
That's an excellent question that I'll forward an answer after the show.
Through Cathryn.
Okay.
Yeah. Contact Cathy.
Contact me.
Contact Cathy. We're both Cathy and I are both if you get to Cathy, you'll get to me.
Okay, Cathy, how do people contact you?
Cathryn Platine at on either Blue Sky or on Facebook, and then Cathryn at GALLAE.com for an email address.
Okay, and Joann, any closing words quickly, please?
Closing words really fast. How to contact me. Contact me. Susan, contact me first. Contact me on Facebook as Joann Marie Prinzivalli. And you can find me by email as Joann, no E, that's Joann, followed by M as in Marie and P as in Prinzivalli at outlook.com. And my closing words is that I hope that these things don't get worse, but we are going to live in interesting times come January 20th, and hopefully we'll survive.
Yes, and my closing words are we absolutely will survive. We always have. I transitioned in 1975. This was not a shortcut to popularity, and hey, folks, I'm still here. So, you can contact me via Hercules.
My closing thought,
anyway,
if we have any time left, is that the next 3 weeks could be extremely interesting because there's all kinds of congressional antics that may or may not play out on both the 3rd of January and the 6th of January, and then ultimately on Inauguration Day. There's a lot of potential weirdness coming our way.
That is a good
I would imagine so. Anyway, I'm Diana Montford. This has been a special edition of podcast edition of the Diana Montford Show. It's called the Triad. We are 3 transgender women in alphabetical order: Cathryn Platine and Joann Prinzivalli, and our wonderful, wonderful, brilliant guest, Miss Susan Davis, who I would like to make it a quadrangle and have Susan on every month, because she is brilliant. And there was a lot of interesting interplay among all of us with, what in God's name we're going to do. Anyway, so this has been, I'm Diana Montford. You can hear us every 3rd Saturday of the month via Zoom. Block Talk Radio sadly is going out of business, so you'll have to listen to us via Zoom. And we are on the 3rd Saturday of every month. We are the Triad, maybe soon to be the quadrangle, or whatever you would call a quarter, 4 people. And we will hopefully, God is willing, see you and talk to you next month, 3rd Saturday of the month. Talk to you soon, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you for another show.
Bye-bye.
See you all next month. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.